Lucas Kane and his ruthless crew ruled Britain's cocaine trade with an iron fist, until a single betrayal from within ignited a chain of events that would tear their empire apart, exposing secrets no one was prepared for. Beneath the glittering skyline of Britain's largest cities, an invisible force was growing. It wasn't the booming economy or the rising tech industries, but something far darker, a vast empire built on cocaine. This empire spread quietly, at first, hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. It threaded its way through crowded streets, quiet neighborhoods, and sleepy towns. No one saw it coming. From the busy clubs of London to the forgotten corners of small northern towns, the kingdom's influence stretched far beyond what anyone imagined. At the heart of this network was a ruthless gang known simply as the Kings of Powder. Their name whispered in fear, their presence felt but rarely seen. They controlled the flow of cocaine across the UK, moving tons of the drug with military-like precision. Unlike common street dealers, these men and women operated on a level few understood. Their operations were a mix of brutal violence and sharp intelligence. They knew how to stay one step ahead of the law, how to corrupt officials, and how to silence anyone who threatened their business. The gang's rise did not happen overnight. It began with small deals and local suppliers, but through a mixture of ambition, cruelty, and clever planning, they expanded rapidly. They exploited weaknesses in law enforcement, took over rival territories, and built a sprawling network that connected the UK to global cocaine suppliers. Their influence was like a shadow over Britain's cities, blending into the background but controlling everything from behind the scenes. Despite the glamour and excitement that cities like London projected to the world, beneath the surface was a grinding reality of crime and danger. Nightclubs weren't just places to dance and celebrate. They were hubs for deals and secret meetings. Luxury cars and flashy lifestyles masked the truth of the violence and fear that kept the empire running. Every sale, every shipment, was another link in a chain that bound communities to addiction, violence, and corruption. This was more than just a drug problem. It was a kingdom built on power and greed, where loyalty was bought and sold, and survival was never guaranteed. As the gang's reach grew, so did the stakes. For those caught in the middle, from the dealers to the innocent bystanders, life became a constant battle between hope and despair. The story of the Kings of Powder is one of ambition and brutality, of a hidden empire that shaped the fate of Britain's cities. But as this empire grew, cracks began to show, cracks that would soon threaten to tear it apart from within. Lucas Kane's journey from a small-time dealer to the kingpin of Britain's most feared cocaine empire was as unexpected as it was ruthless. Born in a rough neighborhood on the outskirts of Manchester, Kane grew up surrounded by poverty and crime. Opportunities were scarce and the streets offered few choices. From a young age, he learned that power came from control, and control came from fear. It wasn't long before he was involved in petty drug deals, but even then, Kane's ambitions were larger than most. What set Kane apart was his sharp mind and cold determination. Unlike many in his world who relied solely on violence, he understood the value of strategy. He built alliances carefully, knowing when to strike and when to hold back. While others wasted time fighting over small turf, Kane looked at the bigger picture, building a network that stretched across cities and even countries. He was patient but relentless, always watching, always planning. Kane's rise to power wasn't smooth. Rival gangs challenged him at every turn, leading to violent clashes that left streets stained with blood. But where others saw obstacles, Kane saw opportunities. He used these conflicts to his advantage, eliminating enemies and absorbing their territories. His reputation for brutal efficiency spread quickly. Those who crossed him often disappeared or ended up behind bars. Yet his grip on the cocaine trade only tightened. Behind the scenes, Kane was a master of organization. He created a hierarchical structure that resembled a corporation more than a criminal gang. Trusted lieutenants managed different regions, reporting directly to him. This system allowed him to control massive shipments of cocaine coming from South America, ensuring the product moved swiftly and securely. Kane also invested in technology, encrypted phones, surveillance systems, and even drones to monitor rivals and police movements. His empire was modern and ruthless. Despite his power, Kane remained careful to avoid drawing too much attention. He lived modestly in a quiet suburb, rarely seen flaunting his wealth. This low profile helped him evade law enforcement for years, but as his empire expanded, so did the risks. Whispers of betrayal and disloyalty began to surface within his ranks, and a new generation of ambitious criminals eyed his throne. The Kingpin, who once seemed untouchable, was starting to face threats from all sides. Kane's story was not just one of violence and crime, it was the story of a man who built an empire from the ground up. A man who was willing to sacrifice everything for power. But with every empire, there comes a turning point, and Kane's was fast approaching. As the empire of cocaine expanded under Lucas Kane's rule, the streets began to run red with blood. What started as subtle warnings quickly escalated into open violence. Territory was everything in this world, and disputes over control became deadly battles. The once hidden conflicts now spilled into public view, shocking communities that had long tried to ignore the growing threat. Shootings became common in neighborhoods that had never seen such brutality before. Innocent bystanders were caught in the crossfire, their lives shattered by a war they never chose. The gang's enforcers operated without mercy, sending clear messages to anyone who dared challenge their authority. Bodies found in alleyways, abandoned cars riddled with bullets, and sudden disappearances were all signs of the violent game being played for control. The violence wasn't random, it was calculated. Kane's gang used terror as a tool to maintain dominance. They targeted rival gangs with ruthless precision, destroying their supply chains and breaking their leadership. But the price of this dominance was high. Fear spread not only among enemies but also within the gang's own ranks. Loyalty was demanded through intimidation, and betrayal was punished with swift and brutal consequences. This wave of violence caught the attention of law enforcement and the public alike. Police forces increased patrols, but their efforts were often met with hostility and silence from communities afraid of retaliation. The gang's influence had seeped so deeply that witnesses were too scared to come forward, and corrupt officials turned a blind eye or actively protected the empire for their own gain. Behind the scenes, Kane remained focused on expanding his power, using violence as a tool to build a kingdom no one could challenge. He believed control through fear was necessary to keep the fragile network intact. But with every shooting and every act of cruelty, the empire's foundation grew more unstable. The streets that once hummed with everyday life were now battlegrounds, where survival was uncertain and the line between friend and foe blurred. Amid this chaos, the cocaine trade thrived. The fear and violence masked a deeper truth. The empire's strength was not just in muscle, but in money. With profits soaring, Kane's gang had the resources to rebuild quickly after every attack, recruit new members, and corrupt those who could stop them. The war for the streets was brutal, but it was far from over, and the true cost of power was yet to be fully revealed. While the violent battles and drug deals dominated headlines in Britain's major cities, a surprising secret lay hidden in the country's quieter corners. Small towns and rural areas, places often overlooked by law enforcement, had become crucial hubs in the gang's expanding empire. What many didn't realize was that these seemingly peaceful communities were playing a vital role in the cocaine kingdom's success. The gang's reach extended far beyond the urban centers. They had cleverly turned to small towns, using their low profiles and limited police resources to their advantage. These places were perfect for processing cocaine, turning raw materials into the pure powder that sold for millions in the cities. The lack of suspicion and fewer eyes watching meant the gang could operate with less risk, moving drugs in and out without raising alarms. These towns became hidden factories, where warehouses and farms were converted into makeshift labs. Locals, some unaware of the true nature of the operations, were drawn into the network. Others were forced to cooperate out of fear. The gang's influence stretched to every corner, from the docks where shipments arrived, to the quiet roads used for smuggling the finished product. This discovery shocked authorities, revealing a far more complex network than anyone had imagined. Law enforcement agencies struggled to adapt. Their focus had long been on the cities, where violence and public disturbances were visible and urgent. The small towns, with their slower pace and quieter streets, seemed less threatening. But the cocaine empire had already established deep roots there, making it harder to dismantle. Investigations faced challenges such as community silence, limited manpower, and the gang's ability to blend into local life. This rural connection also exposed another layer of the gang's strategy. By spreading out their operations, they reduced the risk of a single blow destroying their entire network. The empire was more resilient than anyone suspected, shifting quickly between urban centers and countryside hideouts. It was a chess game, with the gang always thinking several moves ahead. The discovery of these small-town operations marked a turning point in the battle against the cocaine empire. It forced authorities to rethink their approach and expand their reach. But for the gang, it was just another sign of their growing power, a reminder that their kingdom was no longer confined to the shadows of Britain's cities, but had spread across the nation like an unstoppable force. Behind the gang's violent reputation and sprawling operations lay a carefully constructed fortress of secrecy and control. Lucas Kane's empire was not a chaotic mess of street criminals. It was a highly organized machine operating with precision and discipline. Every detail was planned, every move calculated, making the gang seem almost untouchable. The gang's headquarters were hidden in plain sight. Ordinary buildings, warehouses, and even office blocks that appeared harmless to outsiders. Inside these walls, however, were layers of security designed to keep law enforcement out and rivals at bay. Surveillance cameras, encrypted communication devices, and coded messages were the norm. The gang invested heavily in technology, using encrypted phones and apps that made intercepting their conversations nearly impossible. They even employed tech experts to maintain their digital fortress and monitor police movements. But it wasn't just technology that made the empire strong. The gang operated like a corporation, with clear roles and strict rules. Lucas Kane was at the top, but beneath him were trusted lieutenants who managed different regions, each responsible for their own teams and operations. This hierarchy allowed Kane to keep a safe distance from day-to-day activities, reducing the risk of exposure. Orders flowed down smoothly, and reports came up quickly, creating an efficient and disciplined network. Physical security was just as important. The gang used secret tunnels, hidden compartments in vehicles, and safe houses scattered across cities and towns. These safe houses acted as storage points, meeting spots, and hideouts, making it hard for the police to track movements or seize large quantities of cocaine at once. Some locations were equipped with lookouts and even armed guards ready to protect the operation at a moment's notice. Despite this fortress, cracks began to appear from within. Whispers of betrayal floated quietly through the ranks. Someone inside the gang was leaking information to the authorities, putting the entire network at risk. Trust, the foundation of Kane's empire, was under threat. The fear that an insider could unravel years of careful planning created tension and suspicion among the members. This internal threat was perhaps more dangerous than any rival gang or police raid. While Kane focused on external enemies, the real danger came from inside the fortress itself. The empire's walls, once seen as impenetrable, were starting to show signs of weakness, and as the fortress began to crumble, the true cost of power was about to be revealed. Just when the cocaine empire seemed invincible, an unexpected force emerged from the shadows, an anonymous informant willing to risk everything to bring Lucas Kane's kingdom down. This mysterious figure had inside knowledge of the gang's operations that no outsider could have obtained. Their information became the key that unlocked the fortress's defenses, giving law enforcement a chance they had never had before. The identity of this informant remained a secret, hidden behind layers of protection to keep them safe from the gang's ruthless reach. Their decision to come forward was not made lightly. Years of fear, loyalty, and survival had kept them silent. But something changed. a moment when the weight of the empire's violence and corruption became too much to bear. This person chose to become a ghost within the gang, feeding crucial intelligence to the police, while maintaining a dangerous double life. Their tips were precise and detailed, revealing secret meeting places, hidden warehouses, and encrypted communication channels. They exposed how shipments of cocaine moved from ports to small towns and cities, and who controlled each step. This inside view shattered the illusion of invulnerability that Kane had carefully built. For the first time, authorities could see the empire's true size and complexity. The informant's cooperation sparked a series of covert operations designed to dismantle the network piece by piece. Police teams moved silently, making arrests in multiple locations simultaneously. Surveillance was heightened, and undercover officers infiltrated lower levels of the gang, guided by the informant's knowledge. The operation required patience and precision. One wrong move could cost lives and blow the entire case. The gang, sensing danger but unaware of the informant's identity, became more paranoid and violent. Loyalty was questioned, and trust broke down as suspicion spread like wildfire. Kane struggled to hold his empire together, facing threats not just from law enforcement, but from within his own ranks. This unexpected ally changed everything. The empire's fortress, once thought impenetrable, was beginning to collapse from the inside out. But with the stakes higher than ever, every move carried a deadly risk. The informant's shadowy presence was a turning point in the war for Britain's streets, one that would lead to shocking revelations and a finale no one could have predicted. As pressure from law enforcement increased, the fragile bonds holding Lucas Kane's empire together began to unravel. The fear that once kept the gang loyal now gave way to suspicion and paranoia. Trust, the very foundation of the organization, started to crumble, as members questioned each other's motives and wondered who might be working with the police. The atmosphere grew tense, and old friendships dissolved into bitter rivalry. Kane's lieutenants, once united in their loyalty, started to look out for themselves. Some saw the growing chaos as a chance to seize power, believing Kane's grip was weakening. Secret meetings were held in shadowed corners. Alliances shifted overnight, and whispers of betrayal echoed through the gang's ranks. The kingdom that had been built on discipline and control was now threatened by internal conflict. This breakdown in loyalty made the gang vulnerable. Rival factions emerged, each vying for control over territories and resources. Violence flared anew, but this time it wasn't just against outside enemies, it was among the gang members themselves. Brutal fights broke out, leaving the streets once again soaked in blood, but this time fueled by distrust within the empire. Kane tried to maintain order, but the pressure was overwhelming. His once ironclad control slipped as more members feared the consequences of loyalty to a leader who might no longer protect them. Paranoia forced him to tighten security and isolate himself, making it harder to manage the sprawling network. His messages became orders tinged with desperation, and every decision was shadowed by the fear of betrayal. Meanwhile, the police capitalized on this chaos. They watched the gang fracture and used it to their advantage, turning former allies into informants. The cracks in the empire allowed law enforcement to infiltrate deeper than before. Each arrest and betrayal weakened the network further, creating a cycle that threatened to bring down the entire operation. The empire's downfall was no longer just a possibility. It was unfolding in real time. Loyalties that had once seemed unbreakable were now fragile and fleeting. The war for control within the gang became as dangerous and deadly as the fight against outside forces, and as the kingdom's walls closed in, the true cost of power became clearer than ever. A world where trust is a rare currency, and betrayal is the only certainty. The day of the massive police raid arrived like a thunderclap, shaking the very foundations of Lucas Kane's cocaine empire. Months of careful planning and intelligence gathering had led to this moment. Authorities launched coordinated strikes across multiple cities and small towns, targeting key members of the gang simultaneously to prevent any chance of warning or escape. It was the biggest operation of its kind in recent UK history. Police forces moved quickly, and with overwhelming force. SWAT teams stormed warehouses, safe houses, and luxury homes where the gang's lieutenants lived and worked. Armed officers secured streets, blockaded escape routes, and arrested dozens of suspects. The element of surprise was crucial, and the gang's members were caught off guard, many unable to react before they were detained. The raids uncovered vast quantities of cocaine, cash, weapons, and incriminating documents. Secret tunnels, hidden compartments, and encrypted phones were seized, providing valuable insight into the operation's inner workings. The sheer scale of the operation stunned the public and law enforcement alike, revealing just how extensive the empire had become. Yet despite the success, not all targets were caught. Some key figures vanished before the raids, slipping through the cracks and disappearing into the shadows. Rumors spread of safe havens overseas or deep within rural parts of the country, places where the gang could regroup and rebuild. The empire wasn't finished, it had merely been wounded. For Lucas Kane, the raid was a devastating blow. His control shattered as lieutenants were arrested or went into hiding. The network of communication and supply was disrupted, and his grip on the cocaine trade weakened. Yet Kane himself remained elusive, slipping away from capture, a ghost haunting the police's efforts. The aftermath left communities shaken but hopeful. For many, the raids represented a victory against a dangerous enemy that had ruled the streets for too long. But law enforcement knew the fight was far from over. The empire's money and influence still lingered, and new players were ready to fill the power vacuum. The takedown was a turning point, a dramatic moment in the war against the cocaine kingdoms. It exposed vulnerabilities and forced the gang into retreat. But with so much at stake, the consequences of this battle would ripple through Britain's streets for years to come. The war had changed, but the empire's legacy was far from over. As the dust settled from the massive raids and arrests, investigators began to peel back the layers of the cocaine empire, uncovering secrets far more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. The empire's foundation was not built solely on street-level violence and drug deals. It was deeply intertwined with corruption and international crime networks that stretched beyond Britain's borders. Evidence seized during the raids revealed connections between Lucas Kane's gang and corrupt officials, including police officers and local politicians who had been bribed to look the other way. These insiders helped protect shipments, warn of upcoming raids, and silence witnesses. This betrayal from within the very institutions meant to protect communities shook the public's trust and complicated the efforts to dismantle the empire. Moreover, the gang's cocaine supply was linked to powerful international cartels based in South America. These cartels controlled the production and smuggling routes, using sophisticated methods to transport tons of cocaine across oceans and into UK ports. The empire Kane built was just one piece of a global puzzle, connected to ruthless organizations that operated with impunity. This international link revealed the staggering scale of the problem, and the challenges law enforcement faced in tackling it. Further investigations uncovered how the gang laundered their massive profits. They funneled money through legitimate businesses, including nightclubs, real estate, and import-export companies. This money laundering network helped disguise the origins of the cash and allowed the empire to reinvest in their operations, maintaining a cycle of power and greed. The revelations sparked outrage and demanded accountability at the highest levels. It became clear that the cocaine kingdom's reach extended deep into society, influencing not just criminal circles but institutions meant to uphold law and order. This web of complicity made the fight against the empire more complex and dangerous. For Lucas Kane and his associates, these revelations meant that their empire was far more fragile than it appeared. The alliances they had built could crumble under scrutiny, and the walls closing in weren't just from police, but from those once considered allies. The empire's downfall was no longer just about street-level arrests, but a reckoning with a broader system of corruption and crime that had allowed it to thrive. The story of Britain's cocaine kingdoms was no longer just a tale of gang violence. It was a story of power, corruption, and a battle that reached far beyond the streets. With Lucas Kane behind bars, and many of his closest allies arrested or scattered, the once mighty cocaine empire lay in ruins. Britain's cities breathed a cautious sigh of relief. But the fall of the kings of powder was not the end of the story. The power Kak left behind sparked a new wave of uncertainty and danger, as smaller gangs scrambled to claim pieces of the empire. The kingdom had fractured, but the trade itself remained alive and well. Communities affected by the violence and addiction faced a long road to recovery. The scars left by the cocaine trade, broken families, shattered neighborhoods, and lost lives, could not be erased overnight. Social services and law enforcement worked to rebuild trust and provide support, but the legacy of the empire lingered like a shadow over many parts of the country. At the same time, authorities recognized that simply removing one kingpin was not enough. The cocaine trade was a complex and resilient system, fueled by global demand and deep-rooted corruption. New leaders emerged, often more cautious and secretive, learning from Kane's mistakes. The empire's infrastructure, though damaged, had shown an ability to adapt and survive. The true cost of the empire became painfully clear. It was measured not just in the millions of pounds in lost lives and destroyed futures, but in the way it exposed weaknesses in society's institutions. Corruption, fear, and greed had allowed the kingdom to grow unchecked for years. This hard truth forced a reckoning, a need for stronger, more coordinated responses that went beyond law enforcement to address the root causes of drug abuse and criminality. For many, the story of the kings of powder served as a warning. The allure of power and wealth in the cocaine trade came at an unbearable price. It revealed a dark side of Britain's cities, where glamour masked danger and where the fight for control brought out the worst in humanity. The empire may have fallen, but its shadow remained. The war against cocaine and the violence it fuels was far from over. The kingdom's rise and fall left a lasting mark, a reminder that beneath the glitz and grime of Britain's streets lies a battle for survival, loyalty, and justice.